to talk. You want to talk?
You're listening to Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday, the official podcast of Black Fawn Distribution, broadcasting live across the planet and retransmitted on all major streaming platforms. Tonight's program is brought to you in part by Wellington Brewery's Hellas Lager, Deadly Grounds Coffee, Twisted Teas, and of course Canada's #1 genre film company, Black Fawn Distribution. You wanted the best. Well, they didn't make it, so here's what you get.
It's really not that bad.
You weren't going that hard.
Here's your host, Benner from Black Fawn Distro.
Okay, and welcome back to the program, everyone. Of course, my name's Benner, just like the intro said, and you are listening to Takeover Tuesday. That's right, I'm back for another episode, and I am pumped for tonight because we have the awesome, legendary Julian Richings joining us in the studio, in the Takeover Tuesday studio. So we've got a full complement of people tuning in tonight, and I definitely hope that if you have some questions, you brought them, and we'll try and get them answered throughout the show. But of course, we're broadcasting live to Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and then of course retransmitting on all the major streaming platforms and wherever you pick up your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Of course, please remember to like, follow, share, and subscribe whenever you can, and of course, and whatever platform you're listening to on. And if you want to go the extra mile, feel free to leave us a review, tell your friends. It not only helps us spread the word about the podcast to other horror fans across the planet, but it also shines a light on our esteemed guests and as well as the super cool projects that they're working on. So a quick shout out to our sponsors, of course. I'd like to give a quick shout out to Wellington Brewery's Hellas Lager. They keep us hydrated or dehydrated with their delicious Hellas Lager beer, and of course Deadly Grounds Coffee and Twisted Teas. As I mentioned off the top, we've got Canadian acting legend Julian Richings in the house. So I'm not going to waste too much time here. I want to get to him as quickly as we can. Of course, he has an insane amount of films. I actually didn't even know where to start with this conversation that we have coming up. But there's lots to talk about, including two of those films being Vicious Fun and Haul, which are now currently available through Black Fawn Distribution. And Vicious Fun is available on pre-order and will be out on April 26th. See how that works? Funny, eh? Anyway, enough blathering on from myself. Let's get to things as quickly as we can. And you know what that means? We got to hit the news.
Top story. Top story.
We'll give you the world. We'll give you the world.
This may be the most important decision of your life.
Can't stand the heat. Stay out of the kitchen.
Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
You can't stand the heat. Stay out of the kitchen.
Top story.
And remember, we care. We care.
There are certain inherent risks that come with the territory.
Top story. Top story.
We'll give you the world.
Top story.
Okay, and welcome back to another edition of the news. That's right, I've got my news blazer on and my tie. That means it's serious business. And like I said, we're going to get to this as quickly as possible so we can get to Julian on the other side. But of course, our top story is that Vicious Fun. Yes, Vicious Fun is coming out on April 26th. It's available for pre-order right now. It's a new horror comedy from Black Fawn Films, which is obviously our sister company, directed by Cody Calahan and produced by Cody and Chad Archibald as well. So make sure you check it out. It's a fantastic film. It's available on Shudder right now, but we do have a physical release coming out on April 26th, which will be available across Canada on Blu-ray at all the major retail stores, including Sunrise Records and Cinema One, and of course through our online store, which you can find at blackfawndistribution.com. We also do have our exclusive Blacklist package that is available. It's a limited edition. And I'm just going to throw it up on the screen here so you can check it out. But for those of those of you listening to one of our retransmissions, I will obviously tell you what's in it as well. But throwing it up on the screen here, our Blacklist 8 package, which is vicious fun. It's going to be signed by director Cody Calahan. It's going to have a limited edition retro VHS style slipcase designed by Small Dog Design. We've got, let me see what else is in here. You get 7 collectible character cards featuring all of the serial killers and of course, our hero, Joel. We've got a limited edition Vicious Fun iron-on woven patch, a pair of Vicious Fun branded chopsticks, and a sticker, and a Bob Neese chameleon kit. Some of this stuff will only make sense if you see the movie. So, but I recommend getting this if you are a film fan, if you love physical media. We have these available. There's only 100 available, but we've sold out, I think, over half now. If you're an already existing Blacklist member, you do get this package at 25% off at $35.99, and regular price is $47.99. So make sure you, order it if you'd like. If you do want to save on the shipping, you can reach out to us, drop us an email at takeover@blackfawndistribution.com, and we can organize something if you want to pick it up locally, because we will be at Shockstock in London. So that's our next upcoming event. Shockstock will be taking place on April 29th and May 1st, and in beautiful London, Ontario at the Ramada Hotel. Make sure you come down, check this thing out. It's an insane event. I can't put it into words, but Jake and James, friends of ours, friends of the show, have done a lot of work on this to get this back up and resurrected after 2 years of lockdowns and horribleness. So Shockstock lives. This is the 10th incarnation of the event, and of course Black Fawn Distribution will be there with our Black Fawn Distribution bar and everything else that comes with that. You'll have to show up to see what I'm talking about, but Vicious Fun, if you do want to order it and pick it up in London, we can arrange that. It'll save you on the shipping, save you a few dollars as well. Moving on, just to let everyone know, we are doing a Hot Stove from Hell, another Hot Stove from Hell episode next week on April 19th. We've got a whole host of guests. We're going to announce them this week as well. But we're actually doing it on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the new remake that's on Netflix, and comparing it to the very, very original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is one of my all-time favorite horror films. Which I can't wait to talk about. I've assembled an awesome panel of guests, and we'll get to that next week. So make sure you tune in for that. It'll be available in all the same spots as we usually broadcast to. And let's jump into a fried chicken sandwich report. Of course, this is one of my favorite things to do. It's where I eat a fried chicken sandwich and tell you how good it is. Of course, I had some good news this week, and it's a follow up from our last episode, but. Yes, the Kentucky Scorcher, the sandwich that got the worst rating on the fried chicken sandwich report ever, with a 1 out of 5, has now been discontinued. It's no longer available at KFC. So that's fantastic news. Probably due to my review. They've pulled it from, I'm just kidding. But anyway, it's a horrible sandwich. I had a falling down moment. If you know what that is, the Falling Down movie starring Michael Douglas, where I saw this picture. And then when I got home, I ate this thing, which is right there. Awful. I don't recommend it. I'm glad it's off. It's not available for anyone else to have such a bad experience. And like I said, it's worse than the Tim Hortons sandwich. That should tell you something right there. Now, just a quick update on our rankings. Of course, we've got Coco Chicken, Royal Electric, and Tall Tree Sandwich Co. in a 3-way tie on our fried chicken sandwich report. And all the other ones are listed below. I have gone out and tried a bunch of other chicken sandwiches. I've got some new ones ready to go, and they will be coming to you shortly because, I like chicken sandwiches. It's my new pandemic habit that I picked up over the last couple of years. I used to be a cheeseburger guy. Now I'm a fried chicken sandwich guy, and it's my duty to inform the public as to where the best ones are located. So if you've got a suggestion, hit us up, let us know in the comments, and we will try and get out there as long as it's not 5,000 miles away and review that sandwich if we can. And of course, why the hell do we review fried chicken sandwiches in the first place?
It just tastes so damn good.
Okay, and we're back. Listen, I whipped through that because I want to get to our guest tonight. And like I said at the top of the hour, I am stoked to say that Canadian acting legend Julian Richings is here. He's in the green room. He'll be joining us momentarily. He's one of the most recognizable stars working in Canadian film today. So let's check the resume. Originally born in England, he moved to Toronto in 1984, where he's since become a staple of the Canadian entertainment industry. He's lent his acting talents to modest genre films while also contributing to high-profile television series, as well as a few Hollywood blockbusters as well. With over 200 acting credits to his name, his resume includes, and here we go, ready? Hardcore Logo, Mimic, Survival of the Dead, Cube, The Witch, Wrong Turn, The Red Violin, Man of Steel, Anything for Jackson, Spare Parts, X-Men Last Stand, Urban Legend, and The Naked Lunch, along with reoccurring roles on DC's Doom Patrol, Kingdom Hospital, and of course, TV's Supernatural. And those are just a few. That's not even his entire listing. So amazing work. Julian has recently disappeared into the roles of a doctor with sinister ambitions in the viral thriller Hull, as well as an emotionless, barely human psycho clown in Cody Calahan's horror comedy Vicious Fun. He's worked with some of the most brilliant minds in the horror business today and yesterday, including Romero, Del Torro, Cronenberg, Eggers, and Stephen King. From Bucky Haight to death himself, this is Julian Richings. He is in the house and he's live on the other side, and we're going to get to chatting with him right after this.
Need a ride?
As far as I can.
Hop in. This is what you said to me. A group of serial killers attending a 12-step meeting tried to kill me and my accomplice before disappearing, leaving us with 3 dead bodies?
No, 2 dead bodies.
It's one word, right? Bullshit.
Sorry to interrupt your meeting.
Thanks so much for coming out. How do you maintain your lifestyle and keep your urges under control?
I murdered the same victim repeatedly.
Just give me a mask.
Have you ever bitten into a kidney?
What is this, some kind of support group for serial killers?
Why are you here? It's complicated.
I thought you had our little group sessions on lockdown. Are you Skinner, a slicer dicer, corpse humper?
How did you get in here?
I got drunk at the bar. I passed out in a closet for a few hours, okay?
911.
Yes. Oh my God, it's horrible.
Now, Bonnie told me that people are coming here to try and kill him. And maybe us.
What? Us? Why?
Tony!
Quarter!
It got really messy. I like it messy sometimes.
Smack in the face. I'm like a coiled snake.
Gentlemen, we are about to have a lot of fun tonight.
Hey, I didn't even gag.
Okay, and we are back with the Mr. Julian Richings. How are you, sir? Thank you so much for joining the program. I really appreciate you making the time and coming on today. I mean, I know how busy you are. Thanks for making the time. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We were just joking about this before you got on the before we jumped on the air, and is that you work very closely with a lot of filmmakers and as well as the Black Fawn guys, and I'm your last stop, right? So as soon as you see my face, you know that your work is done, right?
It's almost out there, yeah.
Yeah. So let's. I mean, I wasn't sure where to start with this interview because it's funny because we've got to know each other kind of over the years at different events. But to see you kind of in 2 roles back to back, and especially 2 films that we're sort of putting out, both, obviously Hull coming out digitally, and we released that last year. And then we've got Vicious Fun dropping on the 26th. What brings you back to like films like this and wanting to contribute to sort of like more modest budget films? Because it doesn't seem like you pick one over the other. You kind of do everything in between, right?
No, I go for the quality of the project over the size of it. And those 2 films are the bedrock of our industry. And they feature great scripts, imaginative, practical crews, and they're a blast to be a part of. So I I'm very happy to be a part of this kind of family of DIY filmmaking folk. So, I'm proud to think that, people ask me to do stuff. And I've also watched people evolve over the years. I started off doing a lot of student films, like first films for folks coming out of Ryerson University or the Canadian Film Centre, people like John Fawcett doing Cube, and Vincenzo Natale. Well, John Fawcett, I worked with him and Vincenzo on one of John's projects, and John went on to do Orphan Black, and I've seen him grow through the film community, and that to me is really rewarding, and it's an indication that we're maturing as an industry.
Right, and that's like you must have seen this sort of grow from the ground up. Like, I mean, your bio says you moved to Toronto in 1984. I'm going to lead with this actually, because I think this is kind of a funny story. Is that I saw Hardcore Logo in '96, and I loved that movie. I was kind of a Headstones fan when I was a teenager, and I watched it because Hugh Dillon was in it, et cetera, et cetera. And I used to say, you obviously played, Bucky Haight, and like you're this mysterious kind of mythic figure in Bruce McDonald's mockumentary. And I always loved that movie because it was a more serious version of Spinal Tap, right? Like, still it was funny, but it was still like really good. So for the longest time, whenever I saw you pop up in a film before I knew you, I would say, it's Bucky Haight. And I would always say that because I'd be surprised because you'd pop up in a whole bunch of stuff, right? Whatever I was watching. Yeah. And now I say, hey, it's Julian. And then someone says, you know that guy? And so that's my history with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we met later on, but that film to me was 25 years ago. And I want to talk about that a little later on for sure. But just going back to the Canadian film industry, I mean, you've really seen Toronto like expand from what it was in the 80s until now. What are the defining characteristics of that? Like, what's changed the most, you think?
I think we've grown. We are now not just producing American material. We are doing our own stuff, which again goes back to why I'm so happy to be doing movies like Hall and Vicious Fun. They tell, I guess they give a Canadian slant on stories, but the stories that we tell come from the same wellspring of alternative life, horror genre. I'm not so parochial in the idea of, finally it gets to be a Canadian story. It's just that I think that we do give it a different tone, and we have an incredibly fertile environment here. Actors, directors, cinematographers. I've seen it change myself. So in the 80s, when I first came here, I did mainly theater. And I would do a theater show at a small venue that would have maximum 200 people, make very little money, but be part of some really meaningful, evolving companies. And what happened was that I would earn money by going off and doing a crazy commercial during the day while I was performing at night. And then I would do a day on Night Heat, or do an extra, like be a stand-in or an extra on another show that was shooting in Toronto, and it would supplement my theater income. But then I gradually drifted more and more into film and television. And a lot of that kind of came into being through Hardcore Logo. Over the years, I've met Bruce McDonald on the TTC, on our transit system, kind of walking from gig to gig and going from place to place, and we'd bump into each other. I knew Bruce originally as an editor because I did a film called The Top of His Head by Peter Mettler that Bruce edited. And one day Bruce tapped me on the shoulder on the TTC and said, I know you. I've been watching you all day. I've been cutting your scene. And I went, nice to meet you. And from that point on, we started to chat. We keep bumping into each other. And then Bruce went on to direct his own stuff, and we maintain that rapport. So and Toronto in the 80s felt like that kind of a place where you could bump into people going somewhere on the way between 3 different jobs. People weren't, on a trajectory, this place or that place, and people always had time. And I was so lucky to be there at that time. I remember we were working at the Poor Alex Theatre, which is Brunswick and Bloor. Tiny space. There were about 4 different theatre companies there. And Michael Ondaatje was upstairs writing In the Skin of a Lion. So there was a real sense of artistic happening at the time.
So now when you approach roles, like, you talk about quality of the projects and that's the most important thing. But how do you play 2 kind of different characters in these 2 movies? For those people who haven't seen them yet, you play kind of a reserved sort of button down doctor with very, some nefarious, things going on around him in Hall, and in Vicious Fun. And I believe you shot these films back to back, if I remember. Now that might have not happened normally because of the pandemic or whatnot.
Pretty close to each other. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then in Vicious Fun, you're an absolute, like, people just watch the trailer. You're crazy in this movie. And the best thing about this, and it's going to lead me to my next question, is just like in the trailer, or in the movie, there's a line where Evan Marsh, as Joel says, well, why does he dress up like a clown? And he's like, no reason, just likes clowns. Is that the thing that drew you to the movie? Like, what was important about Vicious Fun that kind of brought you into the role? Because it's quite it's a cartoon, larger than life villain. Have you ever played a clown before?
No, not a self-conscious clown, not in the manner that Fritz is. It's right. Some kind of weird extension of his screwed upness, basically. So it's the polar opposite of his accountant self, which is buttoned down and tight, and then he somehow liberates himself by dressing up as a clown and murdering people. As
clowns do, as accountants do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that appealed to me. Really, though, again, it comes back to the quality of the writing, the script, and the people involved. I've known Cody over a number of years, and as you know, like Cody, Chad, yourself, Chris, a bunch of people sort of have worked in and around Ontario with sister film companies, and we've all got to know each other. And it's the trust of knowing what each other is looking for and what they're trying to express. And it's a lot of fun when somebody writes something with you in mind too.
Right.
So I felt Cody was channeling my inner craziness and my surface buttoned downness, and it was a no-brainer.
I remember I think I read a treatment for that, and Cody had said to me, in my mind, I think we already, like, in our minds, we already kind of we know kind of who we want to play these roles. And I was like, really? Like, who are you going to get to play like the clown guy? And he's like, Julian. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, do you think he'll do it? He's like, I don't know. We'll find out. We'll see if he we'll see if he likes it. Right. So now just flipping over to Hall as well, because quality of writing, I think, just in general, just in movies, is one of the things that's the hardest to do. And I always feel like it gets, even in big blockbuster movies nowadays, it's like the thing that doesn't get as much love as it should, because that's essentially where these characters and the story comes from. That's one of the things that drew us to the movie as well. When we first watched it, I can't remember where I might have, I can't remember where I watched it, but when I saw it, I would just remember the characters being strong and realistic. And even in this sort of like unrealistic time, and for our viewers and our listeners right now, like, I mean, Hall is about a kind of a widespread pandemic that happens, but the film was written before October 2019, so it actually hadn't happened yet. So it's really, really weird. Some of the reviews for this film were like, they said it's unrealistic that people aren't wearing masks in it, because they hadn't thought about that when they wrote the movie, right? Because now if you wrote a pandemic movie, you'd be like, well, everyone would wear masks. When you approach this movie, when you saw the script for Hall, like what drew you to that film?
So the exact opposite, really. My character is different than the rest of the film. My character is extremely enigmatic and aloof from the very realistic stuff that's going on. It's really, even though it's about a pandemic, the pandemic manifests itself in very practical, human ways, like the bodies break down, and we're dealt with people struggling and just trying to operate in as themselves, but they become transformed. But even more than the pandemic, what's kind of at the front of the movie is the breakdown of a marriage. And it's really interesting to see the fissures or the splits in this couple, and the vulnerability of the child, and then the societal breakdown. And it kind of feels like it's very carefully constructed, and it resonates about more than just being, oh my God, it's so prescient. It's about a pandemic, and what did they do here, or how did they approach that? It feels as if it's kind of philosophizing on the notion of a breakdown of society rather than a specific pandemic.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because when I watched it, we try not to give any spoilers away. I don't think there is this one, but you mentioned a breakdown of the marriage between the two main characters, but also just sort of like it's a somewhat of abusive relationship. And there's this pandemic and this viral sort of zombie sort of disease happening outside the room, but also the room isn't safe either, because
and it's actually more violent inside the room and terrifying for the little girl to see her parents and an abusive father. And in some ways, it's more terrifying than the breakdown that's going on in the hall outside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thought it was a pretty interesting sort of, just an interesting comparison to how do you get away from both things at the same time? And anyway, that's why we like the movie. That's why it's available now through Black Fawn Distribution. But I think there's obviously, you're in both films, but also I wanted to touch base on the fact that that Mark Gibson is also in both films, who does play the abusive husband in Hall, and he's the furthest thing from that in real life, and he's a totally different character in Vicious Fun, of course, as one of the cops. What's it like working with Mark?
Well, he's ironically, I hardly worked with it. Just worked with him in Vicious Fun. Just sort of crossed him in a scene or two.
Right.
So it wasn't so directly. My direct contact was with John, who was one of the trio of cops, and of course, I was responsible for John's sticky end or very abrupt end in the movie. And meanwhile, Mark was in the background. But I'm very aware of Mark's work and a big admirer of him. And personally, I think the three cops in Vicious Fun are my favorite grouping, because they're just so funny and so gormless, and they just bring so many other elements to this movie. My role is often, I'll be in a movie and I'll bring a primary color to a scene or a story, or I'll knock the hero a little bit further along on their journey. I'll introduce an idea or a plot point. So for me, the three cops in Vicious Fun kind of suddenly open up this other world and take the Vicious Fun into this whole other dimension. And it's a real joy to see. And Mark's work, particularly when you see what he does, which is a polar opposite thing in Hall, it's an indication of the kind of depth of talent that we have here in Toronto.
Yeah, and it's always hard work watching, at least for me, performances where you know the actors personally. And so once you're kind of enveloped into that, like once you're in the film, it's like, I mean, especially for Mark and Hall, like I was just like, man, this is like, it's believable and as a role, as a performance, but also like almost a little unbelievable because you know the person directly, right? But it's a pretty nuanced performance as far as and it wasn't just. I remember talking to Francisco, who's the director, and I said the one thing I liked about the film in general is that Mark isn't this sort of like tornado of violence. It's more unsettling. It's more under the surface. It's more controlling and more, I don't know what the word is, but do you know what I mean?
I absolutely do. And we can't go without mentioning Carolina, who is his partner. Yeah. Because, and again, I think this is a credit to both of them, is that their performances aren't just solo performances. They play off each other fantastically. And the tension between them is palpable. And that, again, is the mark of a great performance, is when you see other actors that listening and working with the other performers. Sometimes you can see some barnstorming performances, but they're their own beast, they're in their own direction. But that one is really good. The journey that the two of them go on is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And your character in Hull is obviously somewhat isolated from the rest of the picture. And then flip that around, you're in Vicious Fun and you're with this fantastic ensemble cast for most of the movie. How much fun was it working in that? The circle of trust, right? is like, it's hilarious. Like, how much fun was it working with guys like, obviously Sean Beck was there, and like Amber and David Koechner,
and Evan too, and Evan Marsh, who sort of stitched it all together with this bizarre sort of leading guy, this nerdy guy that takes us on this journey with him. It was great. Very carefully and very well constructed, because, that scene, that's a monster where we're all sitting around on chairs, and it was potentially kind of very pedestrian. It could have been anyway. But the way that it was filmed, the music from Steph that really gave it an energy. And, the camera work, it was the mark of a group of people who worked together and knew exactly the tone to hit. It's the kind of movie that tonally, it was treading a very fine line.
Yeah.
Right? And I think for me, the soundtrack was the icing on the cake that really kind of pulled it together and gave it a driving kind of I won't say it's not campy, but it's got a kind of a retro vibe that's edgy and but fun at the same time.
Yeah, I know. The guys always shoot me the kind, almost the finished product, and they say, "Tell us what you think. What are your thoughts?" And I think my feedback at the time was like, this feels genuine and fun, but it's not overbearingly 80s, because that's a really, it's a thing that a lot of films are trying to do, is like, everything's got to be the 80s, because the 80s was so awesome when we all grew up, and it's when we watched all those movies that are classics now, right? But also as well, like you mentioned, like, walking that kind of tightrope. And yeah, big shout out to Evan Marsh. And I don't usually do this, but I'm going to do it on this show. Is that Evan Marsh is actually going to be our next guest on Takeover Tuesday.
Great.
So I'll get into the weeds with him about how it was to work with you as well. But him and Amber they have this thing that they just have such great chemistry as it feels like a buddy cop movie, right? And it's done in such a tongue-in-cheek way, but also kind of plays it straight at the same time. It's such a bizarre sort of blend of comedy, but seemingly works, right?
Yeah. I spend my time trying to make the noises that Evan made throughout the entire movie. His little eats and things. It's so good. You'll have to have a class with him to impart his wisdom. But he introduced and again, quirks, like they were quirks, but they were coming from a guy. You felt it was genuine. He wasn't just phoning it in or being goofy for the sake of it. He's a genuinely off-kilter guy, and that's why we love him. And that's why I think that rapport with Amber, is so good, is that she's looking at him and going, is he for real?
Yeah. And how his like his mannerisms are like he's not supposed to be a super likable guy, like a likable character when you meet him. Like he's insufferable, right? And then, but you kind of like you sort of like him just because he's got this genuine charisma and charm about him, and then it kind of it builds off of there, right? But anyway, listen, Vicious Fun is out on April 26th. Make sure you check out it on Blu-ray. It's available for pre-order on blackfawndistribution.com, and it'll be in stores such as Sunrise Records and Cinema One on April 26th. But yes, if you want a Blacklist package, it's got some really cool character cards, including one of Julian as Fritz the Clown. But that's only available in the Blacklist package, which is also available for pre-order on our website. So if you have a question for Julian, let's feel free to leave them in the comments below, and we will try and get to them throughout the broadcast. I feel like we should throw a couple up right now. We've got a question here. So ask Julian, where did he get that very cool painting that's behind him?
It's my friend Scotty. Hi, Scotty.
A totally different Scotty, right?
Yeah. So this is, I'm quite proud of this painting. This is Man in the Backseat by an artist, Michael Harrington. He's a Canadian artist that I think originally came from Alberta, but now is in Ontario in the Ottawa Valley area. I love his work. It's always a bit kind of mysterious and strange. And I love this era.
Yeah, awesome. And actually, Scotty followed that up with saying Vicious Fun and Hall was such great movies, Julian.
Great.
Thanks for checking them out, Scotty. We really appreciate them. Appreciate you doing that. And then Alexander, just as a question for me, I know I'm always the guy to ask this question, but will Hall be available on Blu-ray in the future? I can say yes. Actually, I can say that for certainty. So that's all I can tell you about it, but I will say yes. Stay tuned. But I guess I can't give you an actual date, Alexander, but I can tell you 2022. How about that? So moving on here, let's just see. Okay, so Tylene says,
and here's another of my friends too. There are folks that I know over the years that I've got to know through Instagram and who know my work and have been very supportive. And there we go. It's a new world for me where I have this direct interaction with folks that watch the movies and that are more than just horror fans, or they actually sort of become the lifeblood of our industry and support for actors. So there you go. My shout out to the folks out there.
Okay. And I think this is a gregreat kind of segue into this question, actually. So this is a question from Tylene. So question is, I always wanted to act, but my mom forbade it, saying it wasn't a quote unquote real job. Eyeball roll emoji face. I told her to stop watching TV then. Good comeback. Is there a pathway into acting as an adult? So something that you wanted to do that. That's kind of a dream of yours, a bucket list item or whatever, and you want to get into that industry. Is there, I know that's probably not an easy answer, but yeah.
It's not an easy answer. I would suggest that just start doing plays. A lot of people go into acting later on, and they go into film and television, and they realize that when you're an extra in a scene, it's not very glamorous, and you're not treated that great. I mean, you're not abused or anything like that, but it's pretty boring and pretty dull, and you tend to be at the periphery of a lot of stuff. But if you want to start to understand the mechanics and the joy of performing and working with other people, start in a local theater company, start putting on shows or working with other people, and just learning some of the techniques by doing it. As an adult, I'm not saying go back to school and learn the magic way of approaching things, but just do it. In Toronto here, we have outlets like we have the Fringe Festival, we have kind of ad hoc groups and small theater companies that you can join and you can become a part of. Even if you're not a lead actor, you could sort of get your way in by being a stage manager or being part of the production. And I just encourage you to do stuff.
So that's an interesting thing you just said is that I think when people think I need to go into theater or I need to go into acting or I'm going to be in a movie or I'm going to be the star of the movie, I'm going to have all these, it's very, very daunting, but you're just saying, just kind of be around it. Even if you're helping out behind the scenes, just to get a taste of what it's like and how it can be, I guess.
Exactly. And the process and what's required. I mean, what's required of a part. Like I am a very specific kind of actor. In theater, I do a lot more. I have a wider range of roles that I've done. In film and television, you tend to get compartmentalized by the way you look, the way you sound. It's an inevitable thing because it's more of a visual medium. But you just by doing theater, you start to understand what is being expected of you at this stage of the story. You start to understand, this story has a crescendo and it has an act one and an introduction, an exposition, and you start to sort of break it down and get what it's like, and you get feedback directly from the audience and from your other actors.
Okay, awesome. And then one last question, just because I think this ties in nicely as well, is a longtime listener of the show, John McIsaac. So John said, hey, Julian, I met you at a poster signing of The Last Will and Testament of Rosalind Lee. You are such a nice guy. Thank you. I was wondering, all the weird and crazy roles you've played, what do you do or use to get into the mindset to play that particular part?
It honestly depends. A lot of people, for instance, a lot of Supernatural fans out there, and a lot of people go, "Oh my God, what's it like playing the Grim Reaper, to play Death? That must be really depressing." Or is that a problem? No, you look for what works for you. Like, so, for instance, in the example of Supernatural, I play Death as somebody that's actually very interested in life. And I don't kind of walk around going, I'm strong, I'm evil, I'm bad. I actually relish every taste of every pizza and hot dog that I have because it seems so cool to me. And I play the connection to the other characters in the show, to Dean and to Sam. And I kind of approach them as if they're members of my family, like they've been naughty little nephews or something, and I scold them, but it's from love rather than trying to instill fear. So if you can find what works and sometimes play the counterpoint, that really helps. So I've actually made a lot of really weird, odd characters work and be more menacing by not necessarily playing the more obvious approach. But by finding something that's true and that might be a little surprising and playing that. So if I'm very strong and aggressive, not play those notes, but play against it, and to be very relaxed and to be very charming and to be very nice. Anthony Hopkins, I mean, is the classic example in Silence of the Lambs, right? What a lovely, courteous man he is. He's absolutely terrifying.
One of the greatest villains ever. Villainous performances ever put on to film. Do you find a little bit more to sink your teeth into as far as like a role of a villain or a role of a hero or protagonist, antagonist? Do you have a preference? Or
I don't really. I don't go on the long journey so often. I don't generally carry the weight of the story with me. I tend to be the guy that comes in, I said earlier, as the primary color or something that knocks the plot off to the side. I like that. I like doing it, but I do it less often. I'm the kind of guy that we don't identify as having a long story arc. I'm sort of like I populate a film rather than carry the audience with them. But I'm happy when it that's the situation. Anything for Jackson, for instance, myself and Sheila McCarthy play an elderly couple who are grieving the loss of our child, our grandson. We sort of take the momentum of the entire story, and it was a blast. I really enjoyed it.
Now, speaking of which, so all the films that you've worked on, I kind of rolled off as many as I could at the top of the hour on your introduction. I think I got all the main ones, but I know I'm missing a bunch. But you've also worked, just when we were kind of conversing to set up this interview, I said, is there anybody you really want to talk about? And you said, listen, I love talking about emerging directors. You had the chance to work with Robert Eggers on The Witch, which was his first film. And now, he's blowing up. But you've also worked with like Romero and Del Torro and even Stephen King on Kingdom Hospital. What's like? Can we just talk about that? Because that's super awesome. What? I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's just such different talents and they're icons of this genre now, right?
They are, but they've got there actually through independent cinema. Mainly, I mean, Del Toro, I know less about his origins in Mexico as an emerging filmmaker, but certainly Cronenberg and George Romero have kind of have figured it out as they've gone along, and they've assumed this mantle of greatness, or we've thrust it onto them, but they're actually really humble, really, George sadly is deceased, but they're really warm guys who work. That one of their biggest talents is communication with the crew and with actors. And I guess the thing that I noticed in working with them is that they're not afraid not to be the big visionary dictator, but they're not afraid to actually say, you know what, guys, this isn't working. Let's try something else, and actually change the direction of a scene, not based on the actor's performance, but for instance, an example, when I was working on George Romero's Survival of the Dead, there was a scene, we were running out of time. It started with a bunch of people kicking down a door, running through a house and going up to the attic and finding a bunch of zombie children. Well, there were problems kicking down the door. The carpenters hadn't rigged it properly. It didn't fall down. We'd try one take, nothing happened. Try another take, the entire door fell down and it looked ridiculous. It just kept going. People were getting upset. And, 15 minutes into this, George said, guys, the kicking of the door isn't what the scene's about. It's fine. We'll just do it off camera and we'll assume you're through the door and we'll move on. No emotion. No upset, no yelling at people and screaming at people, but problem solving. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what comes from their experience, that they've grown up through independent film and they've had to solve problems and they've had to make stuff work. And maybe sometimes it's not as spectacular as they'd hoped, or it hasn't had quite the impact, but they've always been able to distill what a scene is about and go, you know what? We really need the money to be spent on this moment when we run up the stairs and we reveal the zombie children. That's the important part of the scene. So, right. And the same with David Cronenberg too. I worked on Naked Lunch with him. I was off camera doing I was sort of in Peter Weller's face for most of the movie in order so that the scripts supervisor wasn't the person reading the lines of these mugwump creatures. He actually had an actor in Weller's face off camera, and that was me. And it was fascinating to see him work. There was one point where we were shooting in a studio in Toronto and we were going to Morocco to finish the film. We're doing the final week in Morocco. And then Operation Desert Shield became Operation Desert Storm. And American producers were running around going, oh my God, we can't go to Morocco. Like that, we have American actors, there's insurance issues, there's war problems and security issues. So, people were running around like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And David just said, just give me the lunch break and I'll go away and I'll think about it. And he literally went away over lunch and came back and he rejigged the script. And he said, you know what, we'll just reconstruct the Moroccan desert in the studio with sand. We'll get a couple of camels. And he said, in many ways, it will be better because we won't be lured by the idea of a sexy environment. We'll actually make it more true to the hallucinogenic idea of sand and camels in an old building and the discrepancy. So again, he didn't run around beating his chest and going, but I want my shot. I want it the way I saw it. He solved the problem, and he also not only saw it as a problem, he solved it, and then he saw it as a way of making it better. And that for me is greatness. It's not, somebody walking in a room and having an aura about them, and you go, oh my God. And with all these directors, Guillermo too, they're very approachable, they're very human, and they have great communication skills. So that for me is at the essence of what all of us do.
And speaking of independent films and that sort of stuff, I mean, how important is it for filmmakers or maybe actors to go through those sort of like those growing pains? Because we always have conversations with young directors or people looking to get in and just saying, you're not going to make your best film. Like the first film you ever make is not going to be your best film. That happens to a few people out of billions. And it's unfair expectations to put on yourself. So just do the best you can. And is there any truth to that as far as acting goes? Like, I mean, because people will get discouraged if they don't get exactly what they want, but there's something to take away from that, is what you're saying.
Yeah, there is. It's a little different as an actor. As an actor, you just have to be brave and you have to go for it, and you have to trust the parameters that have been established by the director, the writer, the crew, and it's up to you to go in there 110% and risk everything. Risk making a fool of yourself, risk making a bad choice, whatever. As a director, you have that kind of overview. Where I think when you see the whole story coming together, inevitably there's going to be things that clash, things that don't quite work, things that when you see it enacted, you realize that was great on the page, but it doesn't quite work here. So you have to make adjustments. You have to constantly do it. So I think you have to get into that frame of mind and away from the idea of the auteur and, like I have my vision, I'm going to do it. And I want that. Yes, be insistent, be strong, but at the same time, you have to have the ability to be able to change and shift gear very quickly.
And what was the first role that you remember doing where you felt to yourself, you're like, wow, I've kind of made it. I've made that transition from theater into television and film. Was there a particular role or project that you worked on that you were like, yes?
Hardcore Logo is a very special film for me. The way that we approached it, the way that we worked it as a documentary, so therefore we were very, very real. And it was also, don't forget, it was early days before The Office, before mockumentaries were the thing. This was a very early version of a mockumentary. And so we had to be totally real, and there was no room for embellishment. Every choice that we made had to kind of work. And so it was tough. It was tougher for the boys in the band, but I thought they did a great job, and I thought Bruce brought this thing together really well.
Well, I wanted to, like I said before, I wanted to circle around about that. If we can talk about Hardcore Logo a little bit, because like I said, it's one of my favorite Canadian films of all time, maybe one of my favorite films of all time. I just loved it. I was into music when I watched it, and it was just so foreign to me as to what it was, right? Like you said, the mockumentary, I was a kid, so at the time, I had seen Spinal Tap, and I don't even know if I saw I think I did see Spinal Tap before this, and it was funny because it's Spinal Tap, right? And it's but it's like,
and it's tongue in cheek too. It's kind of ironic, right? Whereas Hardcore Logo is Spinal Tap's nasty little brother, as Bruce called it.
Yeah, and just celebrated its 25th anniversary last year, and the lasting impact of that film, I remember when it came out that at the time, Tarantino was like the hottest director on the planet. And he came out and said it was one of his favorite films that he'd seen that year. I think he actually picked it up for some sort of some part of the distribution of it, but, and obviously launched Hugh Dillon as a credible actor at the time. He was just, the dude from the Headstones and same with Callum Keith Rennie. I mean, people ask me how old I am sometimes, and I say I remember when Billy Talent was a character in a movie and not a band from Canada, right? So, but Callum Keith Rennie as well. It ultimately launched a lot of careers, and Bruce McDonald's direction is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What can you tell us about how that film came together, just from your viewpoint, because you're pivotal to that whole story, and it's a pretty big reveal when you show up, right?
Yeah. It was originally going to be an Ontario and BC co-production. The funding, this is again goes back to the same thing that I'm saying. The funding got cut just before we shot. So Hugh and myself were from Ontario. Everybody else was from the West. We were going to have more of a canvas for the shooting, but because it was BC money, we had to move to BC to shoot it. There are some sort of road scenes where Bruce took a van and they did mountains and stuff, and they got away from BC, but it was all basically in the province. And so, again, he had to be flexible. He had to go, okay, so how are we going to make this feel like we're spanning the entire Western Canada? So we chose places like Bucky's ranch was supposed to be in the prairies, but we found the flattest piece of British Columbia that we could find, and we shot it there. And we made it work. And you know, by energy and by an indefatigable was the word I was going to use, indefatigable spirit, like it, and a DIY punk spirit. And again, I think the material allowed Bruce to approach it in that way. And the fact that he had introduced the notion of a camera crew that could be occasionally seen gave him a lot of license to take risks. And sometimes if you saw something in the background, or it was herky-jerky or wrong, or it meant that he was very light on his feet. And we have to remember that we're used to cell phones and we're used to shooting stuff on very small cameras. When we shot Hardcore Logo, the trappings of a film crew were traditionally very, very heavy and required a lot of work and took a lot of time. So again, the film was pretty revolutionary in the fact that we really did shoot it like a documentary crew.
Yeah, and it's also the thing that why that film sticks with me so much, as well as like when I was in, like, you know, in independent music as well. Like I ran a label for a little while, and I went on a couple of tours, and I can tell you that Hardcore Logo is probably the most realistic like rock and roll movie ever made, as far as like you watch, you know, the documentaries or from whatever bands, like actual documentaries, and you're like, it's gonna be like this, it's gonna be all awesomeness and whatever, and it's not. I can tell you that. But just from the punk aesthetic and like and also that's a part of the story too, with Billy Talent and Joe Dick, sort of like they've got two competing philosophies as to what rock and roll and what punk is supposed to be. If you haven't seen Hardcore Logo, I can't tell you, and I can't stress this enough, you need to watch that movie if you're an up and coming filmmaker or a fan of just if you're just a rock and roll fan. Like it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I guess you asked me earlier, you know, what was the pivotal movie that I was in? And for me, it was Hardcore Logo. And for me too, it represented, as a new Canadian, it represented me kind of going, this is where I belong. I'm tapping into my roots, my British punk thing, my love of internationally known punk figures like Iggy Pop and Shane McGowan from the Popes, but kind of finding a context in a Canadian environment. And so it was a turning point for me.
Were you like, I mean, and were you exposed to that like in England when you were there, like before you moved to Canada?
I was part of it.
You were part of it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. My younger brother's 4 years younger than me. I was a little old for it. I was at university when punk was exploding, and I was considered to be an old fart. It really was 16, 17-year-olds in 76, 77. I was at university then. So, but I saw all the bands and I saw them live. I saw the Clash, the Ramones, and the Damned, Susie and the Banshee. You know, like it was an incredible time. And in fact, I would say that, you know, people ask about my influences and what actors do you really like, who's been formative in your career. I would say that many of those musicians and much of that energy has inspired me, and ska and two-tone and the stuff that came after it too. has been really influential.
Yeah, I always I had a friend of mine that I grew up with. He was a few years older than me, and he was in university when grunge was around, when Nirvana was around, and he said he had 2 chances to see Nirvana, and he didn't see them. He missed them the first time. The second time something came up, and then of course Kurt Cobain passed away. And he said, if there's ever a chance to go see a band that you really like, go and see them. I can't imagine you have any regrets from seeing all those bands.
No.
Would you share that sentiment, do you think?
Absolutely. And when you're there, you're aware that it's a short fuse and you don't know how long it's going to last. Like Hardcore Logo, right? I mean, that's the very essence of the movie, is how do you put the lightning back into the bottle and try and control it and try and reuse it. It's so difficult. And that's why it's so exciting, is that it can't stick around for long. It's going to go somewhere or explode. So I would always recommend that. Yeah. I was very fortunate, and it felt like, you get these waves of influence over the decades, and it felt like that was a particularly influential time, mid to late 70s.
Awesome. Yeah. One of my favorite, I still to this day feel like the Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols is one of the greatest punk records ever made. And I remember thinking that even as a kid, like there's nothing came out. I always liked that record because they were this band and they put out one record and that's it.
Yeah.
Like one record for all time. Right. But the amount of music that was coming out of the UK at that time was just insane. Right.
Although I have to say, I've really enjoyed over the years taking that kind of energy and seeing where it's gone in Canada. And I've seen bands that take that kind of essence, bands like Broken Social Scene, for instance, like collectives that have taken things and gone in different directions, and not just specifically punk music, but like all over. And I feel that in Canada, especially, we, like our film industry, we've blossomed and we're sort of expressing ourselves really in a really exciting manner.
Awesome. Okay. On that note, I just wanted to let you know that we do a rapid fire section of this show where I ask you 5 rapid fire questions. So I didn't tell you about that before we got on the air, but are you game?
I'm game.
You're good to go? Okay.
I'm not very fast. I like to learn my lines well in advance rather than be spontaneous. But go ahead.
All right. Well, here we go. This is the rapid fire section of the show. It's brought to us by Wellington Brewery's Hellas Lager. Yeah. This is, obviously you can take advantage of their free local delivery. They are a brewery located in Guelph. They're one of Canada's oldest microbreweries, and you can also pick up some tins, of course, at the local LCBO if you're in Ontario, Canada, or wherever you pick up your adult beverages. It's fantastic, great drinking lager. We love them a lot. They keep us fueled, both on the road when we can go do conventions, which of course we will be showing up at our first convention this late April at Shockstock, but also they've kept us going through the pandemic as well. So thanks very much to them. Okay, Julian, rapid fire. Here we go. There's a variety of questions, so they're not all true and false. They're not all yes and no. I'm going to start you off with an easy one. Yes or no, rapid fire. Yes or no. If there was a prequel to Vicious Fun, would you be willing to return as the role of the murdering psycho clown known as Fritz?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Rapid fire number. See, that's not that bad, right?
No, I know. There's something horrible coming. I know.
Okay, so rapid fire, you got to pick one. I kind of consider you one of the 4 horsemen of the Canadian film industry, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so to speak. So if you were one of these 4 horsemen, and of course, Bruce McDonald and Tony Burgess were being 2 of the others, who is the 4th?
Stephen McHattie.
Okay. Awesome.
Very cool. I admire his work massively. And like me, he will do work that he's drawn to. And it's regardless of scale or anything.
Okay. Perfect. I want to see a movie with the 4 of you guys in some sort of situation. So just putting it out there, Cody, if you're listening. And Okay, so here, rapid fire number 3. This is called Memory Game. Okay, this is a new question. The first time I've ever done it is Memory Game. What was the dollar amount of the winning bid that knocked your character out of the auction in the Red Violin?
Oh my goodness me! It would be a lot. I can remember doing this all the time. I'm playing for time here. Let's say $10,000.
That is incorrect. The correct answer is 2.4 million.
Oh my goodness me!
And 2.4 million is when you're like,
yeah. I remember that. Okay.
And even when I was watching it, because I did my homework on this, I was like, is he going to 2.5 such a nice round number? And then I was like, I'm going to write that down. That can be one of the questions. Okay. So, and that's 2.5 million for a long time ago from when that movie was made, right? So,
yeah. Right.
Okay. So, rapid fire number 4. This question is called Tell Us More. Is there a particular horror film franchise that you'd love to be a part of in the future?
Ooh, no, I can't think of a franchise. My favorite film of all time is Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum, directed by Charles Lawton. I would love, like, it's been done unsuccessfully. I would somehow love to be part of a reincarnation or reimagining of something like that.
Okay, fair enough. And last but not least, rapid fire, have your say. This is the segment called Have Your Say. There's been a lot of talk about award shows lately and their significance or impact on modern film. Would you care to comment?
I think they're important. I think bringing people together to celebrate, to recognize, to discuss the art is important. Sometimes the style gets distracting away from the substance, as we've seen in a lot of the big award shows. But nevertheless, it's very important to have that talking point. And at the end of the day, it's important. We can certainly improve on them, but I wouldn't want to get rid of them.
Okay, fair enough. The correct answer was no. But we will accept that because you're Julian Richings. How about that?
Waffle, Mr. Waffle.
Listen, I did have a couple more questions for you. I just wanted to know if you could stick around, if that's okay. We're going to take just a quick commercial break. We'll be back in 30 seconds, and then we'll just get to a couple more comments from our audience out there after the break. And I got a couple wrap up questions for you, and then then I'll let you go out of this horrible purgatory.
Sounds good.
Okay, we'll be right back.
All right.
Black Fawn Distro. Movies, merchandise. Available now at blackfawndistribution.com.
Okay, and we're back with Canadian acting legend Julian Richings. Julian, thanks so much for being such a good sport with the rapid fire segment of the show. I do really appreciate it. That was awesome, and thanks for sticking around. You're good for a few more questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. I know it's a busy Tuesday night for everyone out there, but thanks to our audience for sticking around, and wherever you're tuning in on, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube. Thank you for your questions. We do appreciate you tuning in, and of course, supporting us as well as our guests. And of course, tonight our guest is Julian Richings. So let's get to a couple more questions. There's some dandies in here. Follow-up question from Alexander. I know he had a question before, but I thought this was great. He said, for Julian, Ejecta looked like a very uncomfortable film to make. How was the experience for you?
It was cold. I remember it being cold. A lot of Canadian film is cold. We often shoot it in January and February, and you can see the breath. That there'll often be moments where the director saying, "Hold your breath in," so that we don't see the fact that it's coming out and it's meant to be warm. Ejecta actually wasn't shot in the winter, but we shot in a hangar. I think at Collingwood Airport. and it was one of the coldest night shoots I've ever done. That was the one when I'm chained up and tied to the chair, and I couldn't move. So my memory of that isn't the blood. It isn't the all the awful things that were going on and the screaming and the possession by an alien. It was the cold.
Yeah, and a quick, not that I know that much about acting at all, but I mean, I do know two things. One is that if you're playing someone from Canada, Toronto is only pronounced with one T, not two T's, and also you're not really a Canadian unless you say you love
Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto.
Yeah.
And they actually said that in Argo. And when they did Argo, they said, "Don't say the second T. That people will know that you're not from Canada." And the other thing is like every Canadian will always say both that they love living in Canada and also once per winter, why the hell do I live here? Those are two things that can bring a little bit of nuance to the performance. Anyway, I'm just joking, but another question too. So from our longtime listeners of the show, the OHFP, they said after 200 plus projects, is there still anything you haven't done yet or something you look for in future projects that like that you haven't done that you'd like? Is there anything on your acting bucket list, I guess, that you'd like to tackle?
No, I like to be surprised. I like, I realize that I move in very small insulated circles and I have very specific tastes. I'm always excited when I get to work with somebody I haven't heard of, but I say to my kids, like, I'm working with so-and-so. What are they like? Oh my God. And it opens up a whole new avenue. So that's the beauty of my profession, is that it does span many continents and many different approaches. And I always like to be surprised. So I don't have a kind of a thing, I'd love to play the lead in a Shakespeare movie, or I'd like to be this, or a superhero or an action guy. No, I'm happy to wait and see.
Is there a number of pages in a script? Like, I mean, that you read that you're like, that, I mean, you must have read, like, I don't know how many scripts you've read over your career, but is there a page count where you're like, I'm really into this and I really dig this project? Like, does it take you a certain number of pages, or is every script different?
Every script's different.
Okay.
I'm going to work on one that's probably 3 pages, short film. I'm going to do it soon. It's the most beautiful piece of writing I've ever seen. And it's 3 pages, but it has an entire story arc, and there is not one word or one camera move out of place. So it just depends. It just depends on the story that it's telling.
Okay. This just came in. I'm from our friend Tracy. He says, I'm outing myself here, but I've been watching Julian films since the late 80s. I think the film count is in the 200s. So she must have seen almost everything you've been in. And also just a quick note here from Derek Adams, who was obviously the
writer,
co-writers from Hall. He said, a fun tidbit to add, Julian's role was written for him in mind specifically. And before I had a chance to bring it up to director Francisco, Frankie called me and asked me what I thought about Julian for the role. Which is awesome. He was the mastermind behind all the horrors of the Hall from the beginning. We love you, Julian. Derek.
Well, thanks, Derek. And also, it's the only time that I've played a character in a movie named Julian. So now I know that's why he's called Julian. You didn't even bother to change the
name. I always wondered about that. I always wondered if it was like, is it just easier to act with people if you just give them their real name, right? But
yeah,
I don't know.
And mine's such an unusual name anyway. There were no Julians in the world until Julian Lennon came along and sort of made everybody go, oh yeah, it's not such a weird name after all. So anyway, thanks, Derek.
Awesome. So now I just I'll let you go. I promise in the next few minutes. But I did I know you had already talked about this, about playing Death, or playing the Grim Reaper in Supernatural. It's a crazy, rabid fan base, as I no doubt that you've learned over the years. Talk to me about that. How crazy is it to have a role like this that, is a reoccurring role on a television series, but it's lasted for so long, and you still have this sort of fan base that seems to, like, the role seems like it's going to live forever.
Yeah, and the show has gone for 15 seasons. So over that period of time, there's enough actors that will come together and do the convention circuit. The convention is such an integral part of the show and the supernatural universe now. It's amazing, and I couldn't believe it. The first convention I did was here in Toronto, probably 10 years ago, and I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. And I felt a bit like Alan Rickman in Galaxy Quest, when you're standing there going, "Oh, I'm a Shakespeare actor. I don't do this," because I had no idea what to expect. I was so surprised, but it was incredible. And the actors in the show came out and they performed, and we became like a traveling group of actors and musicians going around from place to place to place, actually doing live gigs and stand up and talking to people and Q&As. And we were actually getting visceral back and forth from the audience, and it continues. And so it's changed my perception of what a fan base can do, who we're performing to. I mentioned by name a couple of your folks asking questions today, Tylene and Scotty, because through Supernatural and through different fan avenues, I've realized that there is an educated and a loyal group of people that are incredibly supportive, not just of the show, but of specific artists within that show, whether it's the showrunner, the writer, the actor, and just the very fact that they're interested in you and your career, it makes a huge difference. And that there are people, at all of the conventions, I'll be there at a Supernatural convention, and someone will come up and go, "To me, you'll always be Bucky," or "To me, you'll always be I can't think of his name now, on Kingdom Hospital, Otto, the security guard, and it's so great to think that there are rabid fans of a particular show, but they actually don't typecast you in one role. They're there to embrace the reality of this story, but they're just so educated, and they understand the component parts, and they want to be part of this community.
I know, if I can just tell a little bit of an anecdote or a story here, is that when I first met you, we were in Hamilton doing a panel together. I don't know if you remember this, but
was George there too? I think George was at that.
I think so. I know.
Anyway.
I know. Like Chad was on it. Chris Giroux was on it.
Oh, I know. Wait, I know what you're talking about.
I think it was Hamilton Film Festival. I don't know. I'm screwing this up. All I know is that I wasn't on a panel, and then I was on a panel, and someone said to me, I think it was Chris G, came up to me and said, "Hey, listen," he goes, the Nathan, who's wants to, he thinks you're going to get a lot of questions about film distribution. Would you want to be on the panel? And I was like, well, I guess. I'm not sure, I guess. Whatever. I'll field a couple of questions. And so there's a big table of people. There's probably like 7 people on this table, and I'm on the far left of this table. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, well, whatever. I'm sure I'll get one question, and that's it. And then you were sitting on the very end at the right side of the table, and on the other end of the table.
Right.
And there's all these people that we both mutually know in the middle. And the only people that got questions, I think, that whole panel was you and me. And everyone wanted to know what Julian Richings thought about everything. And everyone wanted to know how they could get their film out through me. So, and I remember, I was like, oh, this is crazy, because I'd never met you before. So I'm like, it's funny. And in my head, and I kind of alluded to this before, I was like, I'm on a fucking panel with Bucky Haight. That's amazing. And then I remember talking to you, and the first time I talked to you, we were talking about a question. It was something about film. I can't remember what it was. But I remember you agreeing with whatever I was saying. So
there you go.
I had to lean forward and look past all these other, Muppets. And I'm just kidding. They're friends of ours. And see you, and you had to lean out too. And we had this kind of conversation back and forth. And from that point on, that's when I actually said, if I saw you in a movie or a show, I'd be like, oh, it's Julian, as opposed to like, it's Bucky Hates. So yeah, I don't know if you remember that. But
I don't know if I'm digressing, but at that panel, I was there to discuss Animal Control, which is a short film directed by Kire Paputs. And that was the reason it was being shown in Hamilton. And Kire came up to me. He was graduating from Ryerson School doing a film. And he somehow got hold of me and he said, I'd really like you to be in this film. It's an unusual film, but I think you'd be perfect for it. And he said, oh, and by the way, I think you played my dad in a movie. Intrigued about this. So his dad is Chris Haight from the Vile Tones.
Oh, wow.
And so it Haight spelt the same way Bucky Haight is, and was one of the preeminent members of the Toronto punk scene with the Vile Tones, which is a legendary Toronto punk band. And it was sort of his way in of talking to me and getting to know me and stuff. And so for me, it was an amazing kind of that thing of being part of an emerging culture where I was there celebrating punk in a movie that was a Canadian movie about Canadian punk, but I was becoming Canadian, and the son of an iconic Canadian punk had seen it and identified with me and was now making films and is continuing to make films. And so it kept, and these kind of connections are very important to me. And again, an indication that we as an industry are sort of spreading out our roots and our shoots, and we're growing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then that's how Julian got stuck on this panel in Hamilton, and it's been all downhill from there. But yeah. I'm just kidding. No, it's well, listen, Julian, thanks for your time tonight. I really do appreciate you coming on the program, and I know our audience does as well. And do you have any other upcoming projects that you'd like to talk about, or what do you have coming up next?
I've been busy. I've been very fortunate during these COVID times. The film industry has really got its act together and has managed the COVID situation extremely well. There's some I can talk about, some I can't. One that I can talk about is a feature film, Relax, I'm from the Future, written and directed by Luke Higginson. And it features Rhys Darby. And I don't know, a lot of people won't know his name, but he's the guy in Our Flag Means Death and Flight of the Conchords. He's a Kiwi comedian. And this is his first feature film. And he plays an alien from the future. And it's hilarious. And he is really, really funny. And so I'm very excited to see this film, how it turns out. And hoping it will be around during festival season as the summer and the fall approaches.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. Well, I'd say let's leave it there. I'd say that's probably the perfect time to let you go. But of course, just for everyone out there, please remember to follow Julian on Instagram at Julian_Richings, along with Black Fawn Distro, of course, which is at Black Fawn Distro. Just a quick recap. Vicious Fun is actually available now for pre-order. It's coming out April 26th, Tuesday, April 26th. It'll be available everywhere, including stores such as Sunrise Records and Cinema One in Canada. And of course, you can order it directly from us as well on our website, which is blackfawndistribution.com. And also available as part of our Blacklist package. Those are going fast. I suggest you pick them up pick one up if you want one. They are $47.99. And then if you're Blacklist member already, you get 25% off that. So check out our store, blackfawndistribution.com. Of course, big shout out to our sponsors, Wellington Breweries, Hellas Lager, Deadly Grounds Coffee, and Twisted Teas. And you've been listening to Takeover Tuesday live on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. That's all I got. Julian Richings, my guest tonight. Thank you, sir. I love your work. It's been inspirational to me over my lifetime. And again, if you have not seen Hardcore Logo, amongst all the other films that Julian's done, check out those as well. But Hardcore Logo, if you haven't seen it, go and find it like now, like tonight, today. And Julian, anything to add?
No, but thank you and the folks at Black Fawn. I really enjoy being part of your gang and being included in this. Thank you, and thanks to everybody listening.
Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there. Julian, stick around just after we go off the air. I just want to catch up a little bit more. But for everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Takeover Tuesday from Black Fawn Distro. Take care.
Bye.
And that does it for another episode of Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, please remember to like, follow, share, and subscribe, and help us spread the word about the program and our incredible guests. If you're interested in grabbing some more information about Black Fawn Distribution or want to check out our film titles and merchandise, you can find us online at blackfawndistribution.com. We'd also like to thank our sponsors: Wellington Brewery's Hellas Lager, Deadly Grounds Coffee, Twisted Teas, and of course, Black Fawn Distribution. Just a reminder, you can always catch Black Fawn Distro's Takeover Tuesday live on Facebook, YouTube, and our other social media platforms. Or pick up one of our retransmissions on any of the major streaming platforms. Until next time, I'm your host Benner from Black Fawn Distro, and we'll see you soon.